small vegan cafe in Tbilisi, which is in Georgia, former Soviet Union, was attacked by a group of fascist sympathizers who were wearing necklaces made of meat and throwing pieces of meat at the patrons of this vegan cafe.
Let's go. You know what I mean? A lot of these motherfucking rappers talking a lot of bullshit on these tracks. You know what I mean? They dry snitching.
They started making threats of physical violence, and when they went outside, when these people like pulled them into the street, they wanted to start a street fight. They had neighbors holding knives saying that they wanted to participate. Their neighbors were actually saying, yes, we're gonna join in with you fascist neo-Nazis and beat up these cafe owners, which is disturbing. And I think the entire incident and the seriousness of the incident really underlines the fact that veganism is not the same everywhere. When you are on YouTube, and especially when you come from a country like Canada, where I am, or the United States, you forget that in a lot of places, being vegan is not acceptable. Georgia is not just a country that seems to be rather unfriendly towards vegans and vegetarians. They also have a long history of being homophobic. And in 2012, the people of Tbilisi organized their first ever march against homophobia and transphobia. And they held this one in 2012, faced a lot of difficulties. In 2013, unfortunately, counter protesters were ready for them, beat up some of the members very badly, and the police really did nothing to help them. In the last few years, there haven't been any major expressions of support for the LGBT community in Georgia, and instead, the Orthodox Church there has used the parade against homophobia and transphobia as a day to celebrate Family Day and traditional values. And basically, it's a giant march against gay rights. And it's disturbing that that's still going on in this day and age. It's sad to see a country become, I think, even more closed off to gay rights than it already is. And I think that this incident at the vegan cafe, one of the things that the neighbors were saying is that people there were a little weird. They listened to different music. They didn't eat meat. And they criticized them for having Western ideals, which I thought was a bit strange. But the idea is gay rights and things like that are in the former Soviet Union. They're seen as Western ideals. And so they're very much against this. And a lot of the neighbors and everything around this cafe simply allowed these people to be attacked.
So shout out to ModVegan. Obviously, I've got her link below this video. Obviously, one reason for my making this video now is to support her, direct more viewers towards her channel. I always like to shout out other vegans who are keeping it real, who are talking about political issues within veganism, vegans who are not trying to sell you a diet book, not trying to sell you a cookbook, not trying to sell you a dream. ModVegan is one of the good ones. I hope she continues to ask difficult questions, to ask meaningful questions about politics and veganism in the 21st century. I'm going to start off this comment with what seems like a non sequitur, but you'll see how it relates to this in just a minute. In both Cambodia and France, two very different cultures, two very different contexts, two very different settings, I encountered people who simply could not admit that vegans exist, where they were in denial about the idea that it was possible to go for even one meal without eating meat. I know that sounds absurd, but I actually met and saw people with that attitude in both France and Cambodia. Now, I mean, the most extreme example I can think of that, there was an ex-vegan called Leah Keith, who published a book and did some interviews and made a brief media sensation of herself. And she claimed that, likewise, there are no vegans, that people who say they're vegan actually are secretly eating meat and this sort of thing. Now, as bizarre as it seems, alongside the numerous other forms of active and hateful homophobia, of anti-gay rhetoric, anti-gay attitudes, there are also people who really don't believe that homosexuals exist. May sound absurd, but as life goes on, you will meet those people. Now, whether that's because they think that gays are merely bisexuals, like that there are people who choose to do this and that it's not an inherent part of their character or identity or what have you, or, I remember there was a stand-up comedian in Canada who talked a lot. She was a lesbian, And she talked a lot about her sexual identity and sexual politics. And when she was a child, her parents did not believe homosexuals existed. She thought her parents just thought this was nonsense. This was something the media was, making up out of thin air. And then as she got older and she had to articulate to her parents, no, they exist, we exist. She had to come out of the closet and explain her situation in life to her own parents. Then her parents switched to believing that this was something that only existed in decadent Western countries and that didn't exist in Hungary. They were Hungarian immigrants from Hungary to Canada that didn't exist in the old country and didn't exist in in other places. And then that also for the daughter was a process of trying to drag her parents through recognizing the reality of the world we live in. The change that happened in Western society, apart from gay rights existing on paper as legislation, was a change in gays as individuals, going from being in the closet to being public and vocal and identified as such. And in many cities around the world, gays having a permanent presence in a neighborhood of some kind, in a district. It could just be a couple of nightclubs or a couple of restaurants. In some cases, it's really a big neighborhood of a town. And the implicit message of all that is that gays exist. May sound ridiculous, but it's not. That really is a struggle unto itself, is for the gay community to be able to say, we're not going to disappear, we're not a fad, we're not a mental illness, we're a part of the society, we're a meaningful and significant and substantive part of the society, even if we're not your friends or neighbors, even if you don't know any of us, we're here, we're not going to disappear. And I mean, the struggles to do that, I've also heard about some struggles to try to have gay neighborhoods and gay nightclubs and gay establishments within Israel, where it's the religious conservatives within Judaism that are fighting against it. And some of those religions, they're Eastern European also, because they're immigrants from these same parts of Eastern Europe who happen to be Jewish, who go to Israel and then lead these campaigns against overt homosexuals. Now, of course, there are limits to this comparison. The problem for veganism is not that we're in the closet. By and large, you can meet some vegans who are in the closet. But in two very different cultures, in Cambodia and in France, I met and spoke with people who really believed that vegans did not exist, who really believed that was impossible. And I met people who really thought it was impossible to go for a single meal without eating meat, who could not sit at a restaurant and either themselves alone eat a single meal as a vegetarian. And I remember in France, it's not worth describing all the details, but I was at a vegan restaurant. There was a French man who came into this vegan restaurant with his family, with his wife and kids, and he was openly offended and horrified at the idea of eating one meal with his family that didn't include meat. And he was saying openly, because he was kind of giving an explanation to the waiter before he stormed out of the restaurant. He said, yes, he believed in eating a lot of fruit and vegetables, in addition to meat, but that it was totally unacceptable to him and totally unthinkable to him that he would go for a single meal without eating meat. He thought that was impossible. He wasn't an old man either. I mean, he was whatever. He was probably younger than I am. Whatever. He was in his 30s. So I know it sounds absurd, but part of the power of having a restaurant, of having a district, of having a visible, permanent presence in a city is just getting across, we exist, we're not a fad, we're a part of the society, we're not going to go away. To say, now, gay rights is a struggle on many different levels and many different things. Gay rights is also, of course, a struggle against organized religion in many ways. There are many ways in which these things are not directly comparable. But in that sense of having that permanent presence, and I got to turn it around for you guys, because I know some of you oppose me. My video on community that's now been translated into several languages. It's going to be translated into more. It's going to be uploaded in several more languages. A lot of you oppose my idea on this. When you talk about any of these big cities, talk about San Francisco, you've got to also ask, why not? Why shouldn't San Francisco have a gay district? Just why not? Even if it doesn't interest you or what have you. I've just given all these meaningful reasons for why it should, but you can also just ask, why shouldn't it? Why not? Why shouldn't San Francisco have a vegan district? Why not? I don't care if it's, one corner of the city, a couple of, one small street. Just why not? I've given the positive arguments. And I do think, long-term, culturally, one aspect of the struggle we're in is just to declare we exist, we're part of the society, we want to be part of the future here. And, we can do it, we should do it. I do think that owning and operating a restaurant is itself a meaningful form of activism. It can have a big impact. It can have a big impact on other activists. But overcoming hatred and hostility towards you is one thing. Establishing we exist, we are a community, we're a significant part of the society, and even if you hate us, we're not going to disappear. That is another.